So many people will be familiar with this story. So a grandmother, a teacher, has told you that the front of your embroidery should look like the back.
But why?
Why, I hear you ask? Well, in this video, we're going to look at why, and with the help from some pictures that you very kindly sent in to me, we'll look at how we can make the back a bit neater. Okay, so why is it important that the back looks like the front? And is it in fact important the back looks like the front? So there's only one technique where it should look exactly the same, and that's a technique called both sides alike. We have looked at that technique in another video, and I did one all about different types of embroidery. So if you haven't seen that there and you want to see some samples of both sides, you can check that out up here, and I'll show you what they actually look like. But that's just one technique, so we're going to have a look at normal embroidery and what the back should look like. So I have had a few messages from people saying that it doesn't matter because once you've framed it and you finished it, you can't see the back. So a kind of out of sight, out of mind kind of idea. But I do think what happens on the back can be a bit of a reflection as to what happens on the front. So you've seen those programmes on the television, the MasterChef programmes and the professional chefs and the way that they work to create their dishes. They're super organised, they're super neat and tidy, they know where everything is, they're not fighting with their materials and their equipment, they know what they need to hand, they're not putting sugar in instead of salt because they're mixed up on the counter. So they're organised, and that translates into their finished dish, and they always come up with something beautiful and immaculate. So I think the process affects the end result. So we aren't doing cooking, I hear you say. How does that relate to embroidery? So if you constantly feel like you aren't at one with materials and you're kind of fighting them and not working with them, working against them, the same thing can happen in embroidery as it happens in the cooking as well. Our focus and concentration is no longer on what colours am I using, what am I stitching, it's on where's that thread come from, what's this big knot underneath, I can't get my needle through the fabric, and all those sorts of things. So we're going to have a look at those in more detail. So I'd like to thank everybody who sent in images of the back of their embroidery for me to use in this video. They're really going to help me to show you what the problems are and what you can do about it. So many of you also sent in pictures of the back of your work that was really beautiful as well, and I do want to show those and just talk through those as well. So I'll put those up nearer the end. I put a call out for your pictures on the YouTube community page, so we will be doing more of this in the future, so do make sure that you check that out so that you can join in the discussion. So let's dive straight in and have a look at some of the things on the back that could affect your work on the front. So I'm going to sort of list a few things, and I've got some samples I'm going to show you at the same time. So number one, loose threads and loops. So anything that's hanging around on the back and hasn't really got a home on the back, or is a loop on the back, could translate to the front. So is the end finished off? Is it just hanging there waiting to be used again? Or is it actually finished off and can be cut off? So you don't know necessarily what that end hanging out is doing. Loops are the same. Somehow you've got a loop on the back of your fabric, could become a loop on the front of the fabric if it just pulls through. So that's a definite one to look out for. We've also got long threads on the back. Now this does come up quite a lot. We'll have a look at some of those. So you've jumped from one area to another. You're stitching here and you want to stitch over here, and you think, I'll just travel across the back and across my thread across the back. We can just have a little look at a sample of that here. So this beautiful little daisy and bumblebee was sent in by Luana. Thank you very much, Luana, for sending it in. It's really gorgeous. Look how lovely the front is. So you think, oh, nothing wrong with that. That's really nice. And in fact, there isn't. But I just wanted to show you this on the back here. So here's the long threads. It's a small piece, so I can understand why Luana's done this. So you're stitching a little flower here. It's not using much thread. You want to stitch one over here, you just travel the thread across. So she's travelled around all the flowers, which is a good method of working. But there is quite a long stitch on the back there. So that's something to be aware of, because if this broke here, it's quite fragile sticking like that, just sticking out on its own like that, nothing holding it down. So if this breaks here, you've got two loose ends, and that could come out on the front as well. So that happens all the way around, and there is a long green one here as well, where she's jumped from here down to here. So very easy to solve. We'll look at how to do that later on, but I just wanted to show you a good example of that, and Juana's not the only one who does that, and we'll talk about why people do that as well, and how you can avoid that. So a couple of other things along that line, knots on the back is a big one. So if you start your threads using a knot on the back and you're just relying on that knot alone to hold the thread in place, if the knot comes undone, straight out on the front, and that's the only thing holding the thread, so there's nothing to it's not a knot and a couple of threads coming undone, it's a knot coming undone, the thread is loose and the thread can come out on the front. So if you've got too many knots as well, if you do a lot of starting and finishing, and if your piece is quite densely worked, you might have a lot of ends. If you're changing colour a lot, you'd also have a lot of ends. So a pile up of knots on the back can make it hard to stitch through. It starts to make the back quite thick. And is equally, if you don't finish your threads off correctly and you're jumping around, the back gets really thick with threads, and then it's quite hard to get your needle through, and then you're in a whole world of new problems. So some other things to look out for. So I want to have a look at another piece now. So this lovely little character, I think she's great. This is sent in by Lucy. Really beautiful stitching, really brilliant character. I love it. And this is the back, and this is pretty good actually, but I just want to point out a couple of things on here. So she's kept the colours roughly in the right place. So it's green for the head, we've got blue for the dress, we've got black for the cape as well. But actually on the front, if I just go back, you can see there's this very pale line of stitching around the cape, a little detail here on the front as well. You can see that on the back. And then I think so Lucy can get from one area to another. She's just travelled this thread across again here. Just jump to here and jump to here to do those little details. So again, we'll look at that later. But the other thing I just want to mention about this is a very densely worked technique. There's a lot of stitching going on in here. So you need to be quite organised with this. If you put the wrong colour in, probably not going to happen so much with this one because they're, it's blue, black and green. They're fairly definite colours. But if you wanted to take a bit of stitching out, it's very difficult on a very densely worked area. So if you picked up the wrong colour, or you put a colour in and think, oh, not so sure about that, and you wanted to take it out, it can be very hard if you're not organised on the back. If everything's a mess on the back, very difficult to do that, and then that will just exacerbate the problem. So this is really nice to keep the colours within the area, do the greens, finish that off, and try not to travel colours into other areas so that you don't have a problem if you did want to take something out. So let's face it, what's going on the front is much more interesting than what's going on the back. But if you've got problems on the back, it takes a lot of time and patience to sort that out. And then you get distracted from the fun bit. So let's just have a little look at, this is Julieta. Julieta's cross stitch. Thanks for sending this in, Julieta. So lovely cross stitch on the front. Looks like she might work it in her hand because the fabric's not taught in a frame, which is absolutely fine. But you do also get some problems with that because tension can be affected a little bit. So really lovely on the front. We'll just have a quick look at the back. Quite a lot of stuff going on in the back on this one, but I think it's probably not as bad as it looks if you're getting close. I think if you pulled some of these threads, they're probably just ends of threads. There might be the odd loop in there, not quite sure what's happening. This is definitely an end here. This looks like an end here as well. So I just suggest taking those ends. If they're finished off, just cut them off and just clear the way a little bit, because you could get in a mess quite quickly with this one. Because of what's happening on the back. So the front looks great, but the back is going to cause problems later on if you don't sort out this kind of mess first. So what can you do practically to improve what's happening in the back and make the whole process of stitching much more pleasurable? So this really is all about your working methods, which all starts before you pick up a needle. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so number one, have everything that you need to hand. Now, I have said this before in previous videos, but I do think this is really important. And this is why the chefs come out with such beautiful meals, because they have what they need. They're ready to go. They're not looking for stuff or rooting around or picking up the wrong thing and going, oh, I didn't need that. I needed something else. So make sure you've got all the colours that you need to stitch with. You've got your needles ready. You've got the right scissors. You've got a drink to hand so that you can have a drink if you need one. You've got your glasses if you need glasses, all that sort of thing. And if you're prepared and ready, then you've eliminated all that fuss about looking for things that you haven't got. Okay, so number two, which I've also mentioned a lot before in my videos, is use short lengths of thread. Now, there are occasions where you need a longer length. I know that before everybody jumps in the comments and says that. So some techniques you will, but generally for normal freestyle stitching, short length of thread, fingertip to the inside of your elbow is good. This will help in lots of ways. So it saves on the thread, so you don't wear the thread and then the thread breaks and then you've got little bits sticking up and bits on the back that you've got to sort out, and it doesn't get knotted so easily as well. Knots are a big one on the backs of embroidery. It gets knotted, that causes a loop. You don't find it till later. So using your short lengths of thread will definitely help with that. So a lot of these pieces that people have sent to me are only worked, I notice, on one layer of fabric. I'm quite an advocate of putting a backing fabric behind your work. I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video because we have done a video on that. You can check that out up here if you're interested in that. But it helps in a couple of ways. It gives you somewhere to hide the ends of your thread, so you can start and finish your threads more easily if you've got that backing layer on it. You can do it in the actual back layer of the fabrics, and you can start and finish there, and that makes that process easier. And the other thing it does, if you do travel your threads across, and you might need to do this on some occasions, we'll talk about that, then sometimes on one layer of fabric it's quite thin and you can see through it and you can see that colour behind. Depending on what colour you're stitching with, you can see that thread behind. So if you use the backing fabric, you can pass your thread behind and you won't worry that it comes through on the front. Okay, so another thing that you can do is to check the back regularly. When I worked my Both Sides Alike project, we looked at the back as much as we looked at the front because they were supposed to be the same. And we had it on a big frame and we lifted the frame up, looked at the back, did a couple of stitches on the front, looked at the back. Now, I'm not saying you have to check it that regularly, but do just have a little look on the back every now and again. Make sure there aren't any loops on the back, any weird things going on. Sometimes you can get another layer of fabric caught up in the corner of the fabric and come underneath and you can stitch two layers together. I know that's happened before, so just check every now and again just to make sure nothing funny is going on the back. So I've just mentioned travelling your thread across the back. Think about not travelling it across the back where you don't have to. Sometimes it's very close and you need to do that. We'll look at that in a second. But there's some quite long stitches going from one area to another. I definitely recommend finishing that thread off in that area, moving to the next area and starting a new thread there so that you've not got these great big long threads across the back that can snap easily. So there might be an occasion where you can jump from one area to another, so we're going to have a look at this one now. So this is sent to me by C. C is remaining anonymous, which is absolutely fine. Thank you for sending your piece in there. This lovely little moomin is absolutely gorgeous, really beautifully stitched, beautifully finished as well, and the back looks pretty good too. So here's the back. But I just wanted to show you this because this is really interesting here. And I know this person asked me specifically, how do you get from one area to the other if you're just doing a few stitches? If you're doing a few French knots here and a few over here, what do you do about that? So you can see this process here that she's done really well actually. And she's come down here, gone out and done this one here, come back into the stem, come down and carried on to the next one. She's actually wrapped this thread over and under these stitches. So rather than jumping from here to here to here, she's gone back into the stem, travelled the thread down the stem and come back out again. That's really good practice to do that. It's held down nice and tightly. There's nothing that's going to come undone. You're not jumping around and making the back thick with lots of stuff to go through on the back, so all those threads to go through. So this is really organised. So sometimes you have to do that. And this is pretty close. I'll just show you the front again. So you can see these little French knots here. So you're not going to start and finish for each French knot. But if you're, think about it logically, you can work your way around. So orange to here, to here, to here, to here, and down to here, then finish it off there. Definitely don't jump from here to here. Start these ones separately, which she has in fact done really beautifully. So there's sort of quite a lot of method to embroidery. If you think about it carefully, it is quite logical. Work your way around the shape. And you can jump small areas, but probably not a large area. So just sort of think about that, working one area, finishing it off and starting again for the next one. So we're just going to have a closer look at some of your pieces now, because lots of people sent them in, and I really appreciate that. That's great. And just see if we can pick up any other hints and tips as we go. So this is the back of Carolyn's. Hi, Carolyn. You didn't send me the front, unfortunately, which I know will be beautiful because I know Carolyn's work, but she just sent me the back. So I don't know what this is, but you can see that she's worked around it in a really logical method actually. You can see just a little jump here as we've just looked at to get to these different elements, but she's going around it in a logical order. Everything is quite nicely contained here. There's a couple of jumps over here, but again, without seeing the front, I can't really say what that is. No surprise loops, nothing sort of you can look at and go, well, what's going on there? So much thread. Really nicely done, actually, Carolyn. Really nice. And here's another one of Carolyn's here. So again, you can see this method that she's finished off in the flower. She's not travelling things across, travelling threads across from one element to the other, being quite organised with this on the back. So again, it's back to that working method of having everything you need. And within that comes the design as well. Make sure you know what you're doing in your design. A really good way to get around that is to practice first. We have talked about that as well in other videos. Have a little sampler, practice on it, make sure you know what you're doing. And once you know what you're doing on there, you can go on your main one and do it properly. You don't need to practice on your main one if you don't want to. I just want to mention one more thing before we leave this, because there's another technique in this one. And again, I don't know what the front looks like, but I know there's gold work on it because I can see the ends of the gold work here. So gold is finished in a different way to other threads, and you will get this with other embroidery techniques as well. You'll need to finish things differently. So if you're doing gold work on it, take the ends through to the back as Carolyn's done here, finish them off and make sure they're secure as well. Don't just plunge them through to the back and leave them because they'll come unravelled. And if this is finished off nicely, you can just cut these tangled ends off here, because they could become tangled, I should say. They're not tangled at the minute, but this will unwrap from the thread and then can get tangled with other threads. So finish it off, cut them off, all nice and neat and tidy, ready to go on with the next bit. So this lovely dragonfly is Jennifer's. Thanks, Jennifer. And this is really interesting because Jennifer's got some different things going on here. She's got some sequins as well, and some French knots. And these wings are quite delicate. And if when you come to mount something, you wanted to put it on a flat surface, anything going on the back could stick up and be lumpy on the front. So you want a nice smooth back as well, especially with something that's as delicate like this. So that's the front. And here's the back. So again, nice working methods, just kept the stitching within the body of the dragonfly, isn't jumping around at all anywhere. And the sequins are here, and I think she's used a different thread here, but really nice and neat and tidy. Finish the thread off inside the wing, and then you can do your stitching and carry on with your stitching as well. So you're not getting the thread from the sequins mixed up with the thread from the stitching, because if you did want to take them off or add a few more on, the two things are completely separate. So really lovely job there. So I've got a couple from Jess here, and again, Jess didn't send me the front, so I don't know what it looks like on the front because it looks really, really beautiful colours. So this one is an accounted fabric, so it's on an even weave fabric, so you can tell the same number of threads to the warp and the weft. So you get these little holes and you can actually count your technique on it. But you can see here the sort of method that she's used to go around here. So the change of colours, it's going from red to sort of orange to yellow to green to dark green. So you can see that the colour's been kept within the colour. A couple of things passing across the back, but this is probably quite small looking at the size of the count of the fabric, so she's probably not travelling very far here. But what you could do to solve this, and this is coming up a lot actually again and again of these long pieces across the back, is you could just weave your needle underneath. So just flip your frame over, you want to go from here to here, just take the thread underneath these previous stitches and come out here, and that's all secured down nice and tight, rather than going across the top like this where that thread could become loose. Equally, if you've done this at this stage and you've got some threads like this, you can just pop back with another thread, just tie it down, over sew this thread to the stitches on the back, and that's nice and secure. So a really easy one to finish off if you turn over and you think, oh, well, that was too far, that thread's too long, just tie it down with another thread. So this is another one from Jess, again the back only, so I don't know what the front looks like, but it looks like Jess has worked this one in her hand. You can see that the fabric's not taut on a frame, so as I did say before, that can have some effects as well on your neatness and your tidiness, because a frame will keep it nice and tight and you've got two hands to work if you clamp your frame in something, but you can still do it in your hand. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And I think this one just needs a little bit of tidying up really. I think the process is quite good. You can see the stitches are pretty neat here. There's something interesting going on here. I'm not quite sure what, maybe a little bit of knot or something. Yeah, I would go back and just have a look and see if you can tidy that up. You can stitch over it and stitch it down if you're not sure what it's doing. If you know it's finished, there's a couple of thread ends. So here's one here. And I don't know if this is a loop or a thread end, but if it's a loop, definitely get that sewn down. You can cut that in half. You've got two ends. You can lie that end down, stitch over it, lie that end down, stitch over it, and then you know your they're not going anywhere. If you just tie the loop down in the middle, you've still got kind of 2 loose ends. So I would cut through the loop and fasten each end of the loop down to make sure it's not going anywhere. So yep, just tidy a few ends up, make sure everything is fastened down and everything's finished off, and you're absolutely good to go. So this looks absolutely beautiful, sent in by Jude or Tim, sorry, I don't know which one, a bit confusing on your email there. And again, I can't see the front, and I'd love to see the front of this because the colours are absolutely gorgeous. But I can see this is one layer of fabric now because this is the design here that's been printed on the other side. You can just see the design lines here. So I know that's one layer of fabric, so I would have probably put another layer behind that just to help with the stability of the embroidery and finishing it off. If it's something like a tablecloth or something, you wouldn't do that. You would have the one layer. Another reason why you want it to be nice and neat and tidy on the back, really, because whoever's coming to dinner is bound to have a little peek at the back, see what's happening there. So just something to think about there. But again, nice working methods. It's gone around it in fairly logical order. The green's not coming all the way down here, kept the colours within the spaces. Lots going on here, but it looks pretty well organised to me. Loads of different colours happening. So if you're changing colour a lot, it can get a bit thicker, which is something to think about when you're finishing and mounting it. So super extra careful on the back if you're changing colours a lot. So this one's come in from Vishali. Thank you very much for sending this in. Some beautiful red flowers, really lovely and neat on the front. Really, really nice. So let's just have a little look at the back. Yeah, again, really nice working methods. The only thing, again, which seems to be coming up again and again, is these long threads, so jumping from one area to another. And I think I know why people do this. I think it's so you don't have to keep rethreading the needle. Oh, we've got to finish it off, get another needle, start a new thread. It's much easier just to jump across to the other side. I do recommend, though, that you think about finishing it. If you struggle to thread your needles, we've got a really good video on that. Do check that out. It's my method of how to thread, and I find it works 99% of the times once you know how to do it. And that will make that process much easier, because I know that is a stumbling block for some people. They don't want to keep rethreading their needles. The other way you can deal with this is if you want to jump from this area to here. So she's gone with the yellow from here down to here, and then across to here, and it does actually go underneath the red threads. I'm guessing you work the first bits yellow first, and then have stitched over with the red, but just slide the thread underneath if you want to do that. And over here, I would have still stopped for this one, I think, and started again. And again, if you have a backing fabric on your piece, you can slide it between the 2 layers of backing fabric, and that will help to protect the end a bit more. So I've got another one from Julieta here. Really beautiful roses and hand and writing. Really lovely. And again, it's the long threads on the back. That's the only thing I've got to say about this, because this is stitched really nicely, but jumped from the black here right down to here, which looks like the bottom of the hand here, and carried on. So I would finish the letters off in the lettering. Again, only 1 layer of fabric, and with a black thread behind a white fabric with 1 layer, you may see that from the front. Just see the shadow of it behind. So finish that black one off there. Start another one here. You can go around the hand. You can start it here or here, doesn't matter. Start it here, come around the hand and back down to here and finish it off. Again, we have a video on how to start and finish your threads if you're not sure how to do that nice and neatly, so do check that one out as well. Also done the same with the green. There's a little bit of green down here, which is the end of the rose here, and the hand isn't filled in solidly, so she's come up here, which is fine, and then you've got to get up to the green bit. Now the next green bit starts here, so I might have gone from here, and that's only 2 or 3 stitches, so you could finish that off in there and start another one here. I think I'd probably do that, because again the green thread will show underneath, and I know it's only a few stitches, but it is worth it in the end, I promise. And then started again here and worked my way up and gone out to the leaves and finished that off in there. And again with the red fingernails, gone from here to here to here to here to here. This is fine, I think, jumping from here to here. This is quite a long stitch, so I would have just woven it through here, underneath here, and come up to here, and you can carry on with that there. So you need to make a judgment really about where you're jumping from to, how far you're jumping with your stitch, and whether you would be able to see it on the front. if you've only got one layer of fabric. So you will need to make some choices about that, but hopefully this information is helping you to do that. So this one is sent in by Kendall. Thank you very much, Kendall. So this is a piece of crewel work, and this has been worked on a linen twill. Now this is quite a thick fabric. You wouldn't normally put a backing behind this at all. So this is one instance where you just use the fabric as it is. So those working practices are extra important, I would say, for this technique. We're using wool as well, which can be very thick, and you can see this is the back here, but sometimes there's as much stitching on the back as there is on the front. So if you're doing something like a satin stitch or going round and round the fabric, it's going to get quite thick. So anything going on the back that shouldn't be is just going to make that even worse. So do think carefully about starting and finishing. She's done that really quite nicely here, not crossing over from one motif to another, working within the motif, finishing the threads off. You can see the little yellow details here on the bunnies. Finish the yellow thread off in there. Don't jump to that one and do the yellow thread over there. So again, just really good working practices. So this one's from Keenan, and Keenan tells me this is a sampler. So it's not very good, apparently. It looks pretty good to me. But again, back to that idea, if you don't practice on your main piece, because that's when you start taking things out and you get knots and you get a mess and you get cross with it, and that's the end of that piece. So do think about just having a piece to practice on. It doesn't have to be this beautiful. Mine are not beautiful at all. They are literally a working piece of fabric. What am I doing? What colours am I using? How am I going to work this stitch? How does it fit with another stitch? So it really is just to work things out on. But this is a really lovely one if you want a record of some practice stitches as well. You can go back and go, oh, what did that stitch look like? And I know that Keenan had a go at some different stitches on this one as well. So a good place to practice some new stitches. So that's the front. And the back's pretty good, as you can see. And the back of my sample pieces are not often very good, but it is a good idea to practice that on your sample piece, I suppose. It doesn't matter what it looks like because it's a sample piece, but it's just good working practices. Just start instilling those so that you do them automatically when you come to your main pieces. So this is Sue's piece. So this is some silk shading, which we did see a little bit earlier, but very different technique now. So very densely worked technique. This is a Trish Bird design, I think, here. So this is some flowers and some leaves. Let's look at the back. So you can see how densely stitched this is now. So you have as much stitching on the back as you do on the front, really. You can see as starting finishing end. So these little ends here are just the remains, I think, of the starting stitch process. So you can just do a waist knot, a couple of small stitches, cut the waist knot off. That would be on the front, and that'll leave you a little end on the back. And I do get asked this quite a lot. So what do you do with that end? You can leave it. It's not very long. It's not going to have an effect. There's usually 2 layers of fabric. I think this has got a backing layer on it, I can see here. So you're not going to see that through the front, but you could just cut all those little ends off if you wanted to, just so it's nice and neat and tidy and you can see where everything is. Again, kept the colours within the shapes, not jumping from leaf to leaf. A little jump there, but again, I would have just probably woven that down underneath those threads and brought that across here. So that's again about turning your frame over and just checking what you're doing on the back, because you get caught up with what you're doing on the front and you forget about your method. Oh, now I want to stitch this bit, and you've picked the same thread up and you've carried on with the same thread. So do just check the back occasionally, but really beautiful working methods on this on a very densely worked technique. So this one is Linda's, a very different technique again now. We've got a Japanese style embroidery now. These are often very delicate. They're very fine areas of stitching here, and they're kind of all on their own as well. They're not in amongst other things like that previous silk shading we looked at, quite a densely worked technique. This is design is much more spread out now. There's bits all on their own here, which can be quite scary. And if you've got threads across the back, you might see them. So obviously you want to stay working within your area now. So let's have a little look at the back. So very beautiful on the back. And I just want to mention as well, this technique is work in an unspun silk, so it's not twisted. It doesn't have a twist on it. You just have the fibres lying flat. Very open to damage, those sorts of fibres. They're not twisted together. They don't have any extra strength of the twist. And if you catch them on something, which is easy to do with the silk, they can break and fray quite easily. So extra important that you take care, I think, on the back with this kind of a thread. So you can see she's worked it all in the area. So those stitches are within that flower. The leaves as well, work the leaves. You can finish the thread off just by weaving it down the stem there, and not crossing over even from that leaf to that leaf to that leaf. So really good working practices there, and I think you can see how well that's come out on the front. So this is Heather's, and when Heather sent me this, she said, oh, it's cross stitch, not embroidery, but it is embroidery, Heather. And it's very beautiful, and I didn't even too sure which was the front and which was the back, to be honest. So this is the front, you can confirm that. Really beautiful design. This is the back. Really beautiful design. Pretty immaculate, this one. And this is cross stitch on a counted fabrics, on an even weave fabric again, so a little bit easier in a way to do something like a counted technique to start and finish your threads. There's a different method to this. We have videos on that on Blackwork if you want to check that out to see how to start and finish your threads, because you can use your waist knot, you can stitch over the end of the thread, and you can cut your knot off, and it's all nice and neat and tidy. And because you're using one stitch again and again, you can get into a bit of a rhythm with how you start and finish, and make sure that that's neat and tidy throughout. And this is how it looks when you use that method and you use it well. So really beautiful. You know, Heather's had a lot of fun stitching the front of that and not worrying too much about the back because of the method she's used. So I think you can see that it is worth trying to make the changes to make the back look a bit better, just to help you with the end result on the front. So I hope that's demystified a little bit as to why the back of your embroidery should look like the front, and that looking at these samples has helped you to understand that and help you to learn some different working methods that you can use to improve your embroidery throughout. Thank you so much to everybody who sent in your pieces. It's always really brave of you to do that, I think, and to have me look at them on the camera. But I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much. If you want to join in the future, there will be some more of these on some different techniques. Do check out our community page. You can just click on my name or my logo. That will take you to the front page of my YouTube channel. Go along the tabs at the top, and there's one that says community. Click on that and then do join in the discussion. I'd love to hear from you. So if you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, do give us a thumbs up. That would be really great. We've got loads more videos for you to check out, so do head over to the channel and check those, and I'll see you next time.